Good afternoon. What a wonderful group to have with us. I'm Barbara Humpton, CEO of Siemens USA. Think for a minute. Nervousness. Did I do that? Anxiety. Hope. Inspiration. I may be standing too close to other mics. Let me do this again. Yes, all of you. What do you think about anxiety, hope, the concern about the future, recognition that we are on the precipice of changing the entire world? When you think of AI, what emotions come to you? Well, today, we are here to talk about AI for real. And it's my privilege at Siemens USA to get the opportunity to work with the AI that is changing the real world. We have the opportunity now to harness brand new tools in order to do the things that innovators in Climate Week know need to be done. In order to make all of this clear and to have a really energizing conversation this afternoon, Steve Clements, come up to the stage.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Maybe it'll blow up on me too. Let's see. So I do not know what the connection is between this great whiskey bar over here, where you can sample things, and the AI issue. I don't know if it makes it easier. It's the complexity, but you know, you might as well enjoy it. But after the show, Barbara, it's so great to be with you again. Barbara introduced herself as the CEO of Siemens USA, but she's also my friend. She's also a kind of diva on LinkedIn of really fantastic conversations about the workforce, about America's challenges, about the business world.
Tell them about the podcast, Steve.
Yeah, and and tell us the name of the podcast. I mean, we're doing a podcast this week, in fact.
In fact, Steve will be my guest on the Optimistic Outlook podcast.
The Optimistic
Look it up,
Outlook.
Subscribe.
I got to get the nomenclature right. And you know, I'm so rarely optimistic that this is going to be a great opportunity.
I'm going to give you a heavy dose of whatever you need.
And so what we're going to do over the next hour or so, this is my show. This is a TV show. This is not a TV. We are actually streaming live, so hello everybody out there. We've got a lot of places that are running this, and we want to have a conversation with all of you, as well as various experts to sort of look at this moment of looking at what real AI means, what industrial AI means, what are the trade-offs and hard choices. You know, we're at the climate conference here in UN, at the UN Week, UN General Assembly Week, and we've got to basically, ask some key questions about, as Barbara talks about, the huge new growing demand in energy for AI data centers and others. How do we get this right in sustainable methods, and what are we going to do all this? So let me just start out and ask you, Barbara. I always like to start out with the human dimension of this. Why? You just talked about how AI might change everything, but I'm interested as we're sitting here, even 5 years from now or 10 years from now, how will our lives be ordered differently, do you think? What are we going to be smarter at, and what are we going to be dumber at?
We don't know, right? Isn't that actually part of the fun here? Is we don't know. Today we're sitting in a world where we've been given new tools, and we know that there are certain things those new tools can do, and those tools are doing things like, making it easier for us to read and edit and aggregate information. And what everybody is tempted to do is actually keep using these new tools to do faster or cheaper what we already do today. That's not where the real power of these tools will ultimately be. The real power is what is impossible to do today that we will be able to do 5 years from now. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room who are actually dreaming about those things even right now. So let's not just keep paving the path. Let me give you an industrial example of this.
Right.
The first industrial revolution was steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can now use a steam turbine to run rotating equipment that's going to drive belts and make things move down a production line. It has to be a line because we need the mechanical energy working its way down the line. When that line got electrified, you know what people did? They electrified every component along the line and kept operating in that same assembly line way. Oh, a few innovators discovered that, ooh, electricity actually frees us up to be able to move things around in our factory. And now we've got, you'll hear people refer to cells, and I've got workspaces where people are actually doing things, and they're able to move things more efficiently because they don't have to work in a line. What happens when you actually then automate that stuff? We've seen that in what we called the third industrial revolution. Now comes the fourth, where all of that produces data. And in fact, it's more data than any individual person can make sense of. And now AI gives us the power to make sense of it. And nowhere is that more evident than in the world of energy.
So how many of you are in the data center business? Let's out you here.
Either
So,
straightforward or...
there are a few people. There are quite a number of people.
Oh, wait.
So,
There's got to be more than...
No, their hands were modestly down, but there were like lots of them.
Okay, modestly
there were
down.
lots of
it's not
modest
a very
hand raising.
enthusiastic group then.
It's just, they haven't had their whiskey yet. The hands will go higher later with that. But I want to ask that because, I always sort of look at this moment, and we talk a lot about AI being the precipice of change and how so many things will be ordered differently. We're talking today a little bit about industrial AI. I also want people to know that Siemens has, developed digital twins. A lot of this sort of new nomenclature of digital connectivity and the tools that we have. Siemens is not just building power plants; they're developing so many, new platforms in the digital arena. But I ask about the data centers because I'm a graphic guy. To understand something, I need to feel it or see it or look at it. So I'm often talking about how the topography has changed. Well, the topography of America is changing quickly because of lots of data centers, and the data centers are using lots of power, and they have lots of technology. They have lots of Siemens stuff in them. And you're seeing them explode to kind of do this. But as you sort of look at this moment, this new topography, I'm interested in why it's so important. What is going on to drive this explosion? I mean, so many people in this room are in the data center world, including, where's John?
John DeBoer is right there in the back of the room.
That's the wrong John.
Oh, you got our John.
Yeah, John DeBoer. Where's John DeBoer?
Right, back in the back.
Yeah, so John DeBoer is the head of... You should know the head of data center verticals in North America. He also used to run Siemens e-mobility, but I interviewed John in Dallas. That's why it's a shock to me that he's here today. But I think in the data center world, you're there. But I just want to give people a feel. This is something that's going on not just in the United States, but it's around the world, right? This is a key national security, geostrategic, competitive moment. Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah. Let's begin with the first principle, which is power is prosperity. And we've been through decades now where we've learned how to do energy efficiency. So we've been able to take a scarce resource, power, and get more and more and more productivity out of it. Let no electron go to waste. Mm-hmm. Now along comes AI, but it consumes so much power. And we have an insatiable appetite for building out that capacity. And here we go. When I started this role in 2018, I turned to my CFO at the time and said something about, co-located power with data center construction. Wouldn't that be a good idea? He said, Barb, the data center boom is just about dead.
Who said this?
My then CFO, who is now retired.
Interesting.
Well, yeah. Luckily, Siemens' smart infrastructure team just kept plugging away at this because it turns out we were just at the beginning of an opportunity unlike anything we've seen. And so we, Siemens, are absolutely critical to this overall build-out because we're building those critical components that go into a data center to move low and medium voltage around to where it gets used. Here's the question. How are we going to meet the demand? And I know we're going to be talking about that. But
well, I want you to tell us. I mean, I've got a lot of people going to tell us, but how are you going to fix it?
Okay, well, let's think about everybody in that circle, that ecosystem that provides what ultimately becomes intelligence coming out of an AI factory. It turns out the people who build the chips are driving for more energy efficient designs. Turns out the constructors who build the buildings around the big server farms, they're looking for building automation that's going to make things more efficient. Oh, everybody who's actually generating power is trying to find ways to generate more efficiently and transmit more efficiently. And then we've got super innovators who are finding ways to store so that power
And to deal with the heat.
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
So what I
So
love,
it's square footage, heat, volume, all of that.
Yes.
And the story is, it's shrinking, right?
well,
Well,
and
it's expanding and shrinking.
it's expanding and shrinking. And I'm going to tell you that no matter how much we're able to drive efficiency, our demand for more will increase. Who has ever had enough knowledge? And truly, we used to say knowledge is power. Now I will tell you, power is knowledge.
You know, we're going to be bringing Josh Parker, who's the head of sustainability in NVIDIA, into this conversation in a while, and so I'll also talk to him about it. But we are in Climate Week. I mean, we're in basically a zone here in the Javits Center. It's like I have never been here before. I had
I'll
no
bet
idea it
you've
was so
never
big.
been in a more sustainable building than this.
I did not know. I saw the green building. I don't know how sustainable the Javits Center is. I just
Very.
know it's huge, and there's a lot of folks interested in climate. Sustainability, which we're still allowed to talk about in America on occasion. And so I am interested, as you sort of see one of the big concerns that people have about energy, is how can AI help deal with the sustainability part of the equation? How can it begin dealing with some of the grid challenges that are out there? Because, you know, we've heard President Trump talk about wanting to take all the restrictions off, stop measuring, you know, emissions from you know, certain fossil fuel emission things. But how can we get an AI future that doesn't choke us to death?
Well, okay, so this is a virtuous cycle. The very tools that we're building now with AI will help us figure out how to solve the energy equation. So at Siemens, we're not only building those physical switchgear components, we're not only addressing the building envelope, we're actually working with the chip makers. All of those designers out there are using Siemens software to design their more energy efficient chips. It turns out you can use that same technology, the digital twin, to then...
So tell people about, because I'm so excited about it, tell people what you
See,
did.
he's on the edge of his
Yeah.
seat.
Yeah.
Can you see
No,
this?
digital,
This is literally, he's on the edge of his seat.
I think it's cool you did that. I just think you need to market it more, that this is your deal. So
Hey,
tell people.
The digital twin. What if you had the ability to model just about anything in the physical world virtually? What if you could then simulate conditions and test that thing in the virtual world before you actually bend metal and make it? Well, that's the digital twin, and Siemens has been compiling components to create the world's most comprehensive digital twin tool in order to meet the needs of creators everywhere. So yes, the semiconductor manufacturers, as I say, the constructors, even the grid is getting modeled using our software. I see Stacy Mailer back here, our head of sustainability for the moment at Siemens Smart Infrastructure, and she's been vitally
Is that
important.
Stacy?
That's
Wave.
Stacy in
See,
the back.
put your
Wave.
hand high. Okay, there you go. That's Stacy. Because a lot of people want to meet you and know you, and there's so many people asking, you know,
During
who
that
some of the Siemens
whiskey
guys
hour,
is.
this will come in handy.
So you're able to model this and kind of do it, and I sort of think one of the things that I find interesting about this moment is a lot of people have not yet really conceptualized how we get there, what we're doing, but you are doing that.
We are doing it, and we have customers doing it. So Siemens is doing this for our own operations. The very factory where we build the switchgear that goes into the data centers, we used the digital twin to model the plant itself, model the equipment that's in there. By modeling that, by having a digital-first approach, that team built their factory in 15 months. You know, all these folks who are saying, hey, you can't bring manufacturing back, it'll take, you know, years to put things up. No, we're actually getting moving. And you take humans and their ingenuity, give them the tools they need to be able to do this, and suddenly then we are able to respond to what is a national priority.
You know, yesterday I moderated a forum with Joseph Mikett. He's a guy at CSIS. He runs their climate and energy program at the Center for Strategic International Studies. And he was looking at AI and power, AI in the grid. So very much like along the topic that we're doing now. And in it, he kind of laid out the kind of scenario. I mean, he's a very nice guy, and he's not an aggressive paper. But buried beneath it in the paper is essentially this won't happen on its own. That it requires deliberate action. So you got to deal with, grid investment, for instance. And I just was noticed that the United States is launching an effort to speed the power grid project for AI. That these things are happening. What's your gut, Barbara? Because I would tell you, particularly in Washington, it just always feels like we're running ahead and then running 2 steps back. I'm just sort of interested in whether or not you think, from a policy perspective, that we've got this, that we're doing it all correctly, or is there a chance we could screw up this future?
I won't talk about screwing up. Remember, I am the host of the Optimistic Outlook podcast. You can find it on any of your podcast downloads.
And I'm apparently going to be on it this week, so.
But think about it. If you're a constructor in this world, you're dealing not only with federal regulation, you're dealing with state and local regulation. There's a ton that people have to go through. And in the world of then dealing with the utility, there's this big question of how do I get connected? I have the privilege of serving on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, which brings me into dialogue with people from all parts of the economy. And I was talking to a utility provider on the board as well. And we've heard a lot about maybe data centers could go behind the meter. Maybe they could do power generation on site. And the utility's response to that is they could if they wanted to be a utility themselves. And the fact is, there are a lot of people who specialize in a lot of things, and a lot of those then data center operators, whether it's the hyperscaler or the landlord, right, they actually would prefer to be able to get their power from the utility. So utilities everywhere are doing all kinds of creative things to try to find ways to solve this problem. One that I think you're going to talk about with us a little bit today is literally get creative about the assets you already have. Yes, you're on site with your own operations. You have the ability to get behind your meter. We did that in Wendell, North Carolina, where we said we want to build more switchgear in the medium voltage range. And the factory in Wendell needed to expand, and there wasn't enough power immediately. What about a 1.4 megawatt solar farm set up as a microgrid, so that the facility itself has control over the power it's going to need in order to perform? We're lucky that way because we had some land.
By the way, did you see all the solar panels along the way walking in here?
That's the Javits Center solution.
You know who made them?
I don't know who made the solar panels, but I know who put up the system, and this was Stacey
I was told
Mailer's
that Siemens put up the system. I wasn't even trying to be a commercial. It's just a statement of fact, right? It is.
It is. Siemens was the partner to Javits as they implemented their huge energy savings performance contract. Now think about this. Here's a large facility that was spending yay so much on the power that they were using. Just with energy savings measures in the building, they were able to produce enough savings that they could pay for the whole project, right? These are things that we can do. They're within our reach, and it's not a huge capital expenditure per se if you can find the pockets of money that will help you pay for it. So the very things that are going to help us be more sustainable are also efficient. You've heard this story before, but I think it can't be told enough that really this is not an either or. We don't have to make false choices.
Team, can we give John DeBoer a mic for a minute? Sorry, John. I just can't stay away from you. We have a mic? So John, he's a Siemens guy, the data center guy. We had a great time in Dallas. What is the toughest question you want to ask Barbara Humpton about data centers and the future of AI? And also, I just want to frame it. I think there's a concept here which we haven't really gotten into. We're going to get it. Barbara's going to stay up and we're going to talk to a lot of people. But what is industrial AI? AI for real and industrial AI deliver? So I think a lot of people, and I think there's a very sophisticated audience here, think of AI in terms of their own personal habits and choices. But there's another dimension, frankly, systems to talking to systems, smart cities, all of the data feeds. So your chance to ask Barbara a question.
Well, maybe what I'll do is...
you're not going to even ask questions. You're just going to speak and pontificate.
I'm the one who asks the questions here.
I know. No, I think one of the things I'd be curious about, as we have, I think, some folks from NVIDIA coming on as well,
And that's Josh Parker, wave. That's just, he's going to be up here in a
Perfect.
second. Yeah, okay.
Awesome. As we start to think about the future of AI, and I think the thing we tend to picture is very large AI data centers. What about AI at the edge? What about some of the trends of kind of moving to this AI factory? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Perfect.
I'm so glad you asked, John. Actually, this is a fantastic question because when we talk about AI, we often think about the AI factory, right? We think about AI in the large where a model has been built, one model to rule them all. There is another opportunity here. And actually, earlier today, I was at Concordia, and I got to speak to an innovator in the field of medicine who said, what I've created is a very specific model, a small language model, a private language model, and he's focused in on a particular field of study and applying the same technology that runs our big social lives, applying it in a very controlled environment. And so, John, I actually think we're going to see more and more of this. I've seen another company who is working on what you might think of as a rooftop data center for exactly this kind of work. What if I had small models that I could run more locally and maybe have backhaul capability for big things? We all know that AI agents are going to farm out their questions to the appropriate resource. There might be plenty of things that can be handled locally. Well, if we do that, do you remember, some of us are old enough to remember a day when buildings first got Wi-Fi put in, or a local area network. And remember, the buildings that actually were enabled in that way became the killer commercial real estate assets. That became a capability that moved the real estate markets.
Many of you are too young to remember that
But
transition.
there was a time. There was a time, and I'm going to predict that we are soon entering the phase where every building is going to want to have its own AI at the edge, so that they can be participating in this new dimension of the economy.
It's a great point. It's one of the reasons I want to bring Josh Parker up here, to talk about sustainability. So, Barbara, why don't you just join us right here?
What do you think? Now, see,
Yeah.
John does gigawatt scale
Right.
data centers, and we're talking about...
Well, great. Well, why don't you sit right here, Barbara? Move right over on the couch.
I'm going to move over.
And,
like they do on the talk
Josh,
shows.
we've got a mic here for you. And
hand you one.
thank you. So everybody, give Barbara a round of applause.
You still
so
want me
far,
here.
so good. So far, so good. And Josh is the head of sustainability at NVIDIA. He is, I mentioned earlier, our conversation, I think it was yesterday. I've had a blur. Maybe it was 2 days ago. But as we sort of talk about this broad question of sustainability, the other big thing is you sort of talk about buildings and what might happen in terms of being the next cutting edge environment. I've always been interested in the LEED certification. This must be LEED certified through everything to this building here in the Javits, basically in health. But I've also been interested in how LEEDs is now certifying communities as the most healthy. Maybe they have coffee shops, or they deal with inner age issues well, or they've got these various kinds of things. I remember talking to the mayor of Houston, who believed he wanted to create more and more healthy communities that were certified in the LEEDs process. And it makes me ask the question, even before I get to AI and energy, which I know is your specialty, but what can AI do to help us with healthier communities and thinking more smartly about this, Josh?
Barbara, it sounded like you were about to jump in there if you've got a great answer. But I first off appreciate sharing the couch with you, Barbara. I feel like between the two of us, we may float away on our optimism. I'm not used to sharing the stage with somebody who's as equally as optimistic as I am about AI and its potential for sustainability. To answer your question, Steve, the opportunities that we have for communities are ones that, that's kind of one level down, so it is harder to predict because we're seeing huge improvements in sustainability commercially. So in manufacturing, in transportation, in buildings. So improving the efficiency there is really driving costs down, driving efficiency up. It's helping companies be more profitable and do more with the money that they've got and the energy that they've got. I think the next phase of that, we'll see more AI for social applications. So one thing that I'm really excited about, and in fact, if any of you in the audience are interested in this as well, please come find me, but is AI for EdTech, especially in the Global South. If we think about What can we do to try to close the educational gap? I think personalized AI tutors that are based on open source large language models have as much potential as anything I've seen. So that I think there's some of those
They could
social
help
first.
even out education in the United States.
That's true.
I mean, I think that's
globally.
another really important thing. So it's John and Ian. I'm not going to yet, but is it Ian? Ian and John. So these two guys, they're Terra Power, and they're out there. We were kind of talking, largely about the future of power, of volatility in power. I don't understand all this stuff. We're going to get to them later. But as you sort of look at this big question of AI and the power demand that's coming on, they said there's some lurking issues out there that have to be solved. But before we get to them, I'm interested in how you see AI coming in and dealing with, one, it's driving up the need for demand, but how does it actually work that we're going to try to get smarter in a system where we get better, sustainable, maybe climate-friendly or climate-supportive solutions out of this arena?
So if you think of the state of the grid in the United States and electricity generation and where...
Would you give the state of the grid a grade?
No, I wouldn't. But thank you. Thank you for asking. If you think about what it looks like, it's not as modern as we want it to be. So especially we're
like
Climate
C
Week.
minus?
Okay, Steve gave it a C minus. We'll just go with that. If you think about where it is and where we want to go, we've got mixed resources, like on the supply side, right? We've got transmission that's not perfect. Energy's not always getting where it's most needed. There's opportunities for modernization, and we're bringing on more and more variable energy. And we have more and more energy assets with batteries and potentially opportunities for balancing loads and things like that. That's a very complex problem that to try to manage. Energy flowing in multiple directions and trying to optimize for times of day and usage and everything and be predictive. What tool can we think of that might be able to help us with a problem like that? It's AI. AI is really good at predicting and optimizing systems for variables. So if we want to do with the grid is to modernize it, incorporate more variable energy, bring online assets, the batteries, and be able to tap into those at peak loads, use dynamic line ratings, lots of opportunities there. AI is probably the best tool we have to help solve for a lot of them. So it's going to help us, as Barbara was mentioning, address the very problems that we're talking about.
Let me ask you a tough question on the sustainability front. Do any of you read USA Facts? Any of you know USA Facts? USA Facts was set up by Steve Ballmer. It's a wonderful platform for looking at a very apolitical way at lots of key questions. And Steve Ballmer did this fantastic video on energy. And it kind of blew me away. And he said, the numbers are the numbers. And he said, over the last 20 years, we've moved from 88% dependency on fossil fuels for America's energy profile to 82%. And 9% of that 82% is nuclear. And so you've essentially had, despite the the giant surge from very low base of renewables, it's still in the overall share is rather small. And the question is, how do you keep it going? But I'm interested as we look at the demand for energy there, how do we continue to make, from your perspective, to continue to tack towards sustainable energy solutions for our AI systems and data centers? How do we get that equation right? I think that's what this city is thinking about this week, and I'd love to have you just answer the question smartly.
One thing that you and I actually talked about last night with a partner of NVIDIA's called Emerald AI is the potential to use more of the energy that we're already generating in the United States.
Right.
So there are a couple features about AI factories that are really significant if you think about them on the grid. Number one, AI doesn't care where it goes to school, so you can train your large language models to the extent you're not using small language models. You can train them where you have excess energy and then move them to wherever you need them to use them to actually access them. So that geographic flexibility is important. What also is important is potential for temporal flexibility. And this partner of ours, Emerald AI, came up with a solution to scale back by 25% the energy that a data center is using just for a few hours. And if you scale it back just by 25% for a few hours, it may be tens of an hours per year, so not a lot. Just a small proportion of the year, scale it back 25%. There's the potential to unlock 100 megawatts of power that's already in the grid, and just pulling it when it's available and then scaling back when you're at peak load to take better advantage. that improves the efficiency of the existing assets that we have, and improves the cost of the energy because you're taking better advantage of it, and most importantly, perhaps, it unlocks immediate access to energy when we're in this supply crunch.
So before we get off of this, I'm gonna come to my friend John. Where's Naraka? Did you have right here, John? I'd go to Ian, but I understand John better. Ian, you're from Scotland, right?
I'm from Texas.
Yeah, you've got that thick Scottish.
East Texas.
Yeah, and that's probably why I have the whiskey here today. So anyway, John, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, because you were basically telling us that one of the things that we needed to get right, first identify you, tell people that you're with TerraPower, but I would love you to chat and tell us one of the problems we need to solve that I think Josh began to address.
My name is John Perella. I'm the CEO of TerraFlow Energy. We make domestic-based manufacturer of flow batteries for AI data centers. One of the things that we're seeing with the large AI data centers wasn't as prominent when you're just talking 30 megawatts was a big data center back in the day. Now you're talking gigawatt scale data centers, and very familiar with Emerald AI and curtailing load and turning data centers into grid assets is absolutely a necessary move forward for us to be able to fit them all. But one thing everybody talks about is the interconnection. The one thing nobody talks about is the power volatility of the AI data centers. When you start talking gigawatt scales, we're seeing data centers where a third to half the data center is swinging 12 times a minute, and there's not a grid asset that can support that or a generator. So storage is absolutely, that's why we're growing as quickly as we are. Storage is absolutely probably the only solution right now that I've seen that can help support that. But I'm curious to see, we're now seeing the ones that are actually turning on, calling us going, okay, the volatility is real, now we need to solve for it. So I'm curious, I've heard some of your solutions that they've started to come up with to solve that, but I'm curious to see how you guys are looking at that volatility issue when it comes to
Great, so
designing
take his
servers.
question, but answer it in a way that I will understand it. Is that okay?
So basically what we're building, right, and what our partners are building are huge supercomputers. And when you're getting those, turning those on, changing workloads, managing the electricity coming in can be challenging. It's so complex. I mean, one of our systems, one server has over 1 million parts, right? And so and when you look at an entire data center, yeah, you scale that over a lot. They're extremely complex. So there is an engineering challenge where you want the energy consumption to be predictable, and managing the swings in the electricity consumption is it's a challenge. It's a technical challenge though, and that's exactly what we're good at. So with the help of our engineering team and AI, typically, we address challenges like that. It's something that we're working on, as you mentioned, and I think it's something that we will improve. Certainly having storage on site helps with that, but yeah, it's a technical challenge that
I want to give your optimistic friend a chance to pose a question.
Well, I'm really curious. I've seen the sustainability heads of the hyperscalers have been actually creating markets. So, over the last few years, you've seen their commitment, when you say Microsoft, Google, et cetera, their commitment to purchasing green electricity. They said any one of us could have done this, but when we put our buying power together, suddenly we had a demand that was worth creating for. And I'm kind of curious how you all are at NVIDIA thinking about the ideas of where's the power coming from?
So the short answer is because AI is so valuable, and I don't just mean economically valuable, but I mean for sustainability as well. So long term, the best chance of us of really beating climate change and reducing reliance on critical minerals and reducing our water consumption, all of the above, I think credibly comes from AI. So if we get through this near-term supply constraint for energy, we'll start to see the benefits really unfold. And we're already seeing really strong evidence of those green shoots. Near term, we've got a supply challenge, right, with energy. And that's why some of these solutions where we can tap into existing resources, have better utilization, is so important. But the hyperscalers, the large colos where most of the accelerated servers are being built out right now, have very ambitious climate commitments. I saw a statistic from the International Energy Agency in April. They said that they estimated that half of the corporate power purchase agreements for renewable energy in the United States were from data centers. So of all of the sectors and all of the loads, and other sectors like manufacturing, transportation, buildings are much, much larger energy consumers, but the data centers were responsible for half of the renewable energy contracts in the United States over the past 3 years. So that focus on renewable energy is there. It's being maintained. They're still pursuing it, but in the near term, everybody's using whatever energy they have available.
Right. I think what I hear you saying is use whatever power you can get, because then we'll be game changers in figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what he says. Josh, when did you become head of sustainability at NVIDIA?
It's just over 2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, you were not the most valuable company in the world 2 years ago. So is there a correlation between you joining and becoming, the most valuable company in the
I
world?
like to think
did,
so,
Did,
yeah.
your neighbors and did everyone begin treating you differently when NVIDIA became the most valuable company in the world? Is it weird? Because you have like more of a spotlight on you and what you say because you're the head of sustainability for the world's richest company.
Yeah. I mean, people didn't
Most
start
valuable, I should say. Yeah.
People didn't start treating me differently until I started name dropping. And that's what really made the difference.
So
No,
that's
it's-
what we do in
it's-
DC. We embrace name dropping.
No, it's really, really fun to be in AI and sustainability right now. And that's because AI is exciting itself, but those of us who've been in sustainability for a while, and I've been in sustainability for a previous role as well, we're so used to being worried and legitimately worried about the trajectory on where are we going to go, how are we going to solve this. And what we've seen is that policy, we don't have the policy willpower to solve sustainability challenges right now. What's our best hope? It's to innovate our way out. AI is not
So that is
silver
the
bullet.
coolest and most interesting answer I've heard all week. So you're basically saying, screw government, we don't care what you do. And business is going to step in, and innovators are going to step in. No, it's a very important statement you're saying. Look, I know I'm saying it more dramatically for effect, but I think this is an environment where a lot of the global progress that's been made in this area is at least on hold, right, at some degree, and some others are beginning to think. But you're saying there are a lot of opportunities because of technology, innovation, and business leadership.
That's right, yeah. So is AI going to solve policy problems by itself? No. Absolutely, we need policy. We care deeply about good policy. We need good AI governance, et cetera. We want the world to get AI right. But if you look at what AI is doing, whether or not we want it to, whether or not we're trying to engineer our systems to reduce emissions, if we're helping manufacturers reduce their energy by 30%, if we're helping buildings reduce their energy by 30%, because we're optimizing using AI, that means lower emissions. And that's not even talking about the moonshots, things like nuclear fusion. If we accelerate the practicality of nuclear fusion and abundant energy by just a year, how much is that worth
Barbara,
in
where
terms
are
of
we on
carbon
nuclear
emissions?
fusion? Are you folks in nuclear fusion yet?
It's interesting. People working on fusion are actually using Siemens digital tools, the digital twin, et cetera. Now, there are some innovators who are trying to go it alone. And but we're actually actively engaged with many, and we know that there was basic research done in the U.S. that has proven useful. We know that innovators elsewhere in the world are using that basic research and have taken it into practice.
Right.
So Steve.
So at some point we could have.
At some point, now I'm with Josh. Right, we do know that we've got policy issues to get through, but I'm encouraged by some policymakers who have that humility to be able to look at a situation and go, it's more important for us to make progress than for us to have perfect knowledge. And and they're enabling change. So I'm hopeful.
I sort of feel like Barbara Humpton and I are sort of like Donnie and Marie Osmond, kind of. I'm a little bit country, she's a little bit rock and roll. We're going to do this thing tomorrow. And about optimism or not. But I think one of the interesting differences in us is Barbara really believes in public-private partnerships. I look at it as the blandest concept in the world. I do think public-private partnerships are important, but also the specificity of them, the goals, the detail of them. I'm just interested in what you think about public-private partnerships, Josh, and what needs to get right. And because I think a lot of people talk about public-private partnerships and think, oh, it'll just solve itself. I find it, sort of lacking the accountability frame in there. I'm sort of interested. Is that a fair depiction, Barbara? You look concerned in the way
I'm not
framed
concerned
it.
at all. No, in fact, but everybody stop and think for just a minute about what are the things in our world where you wouldn't look to a private company to solve that problem, right? And let's just think like Alexander Hamilton for a minute and go, what are those areas where...
Are you going to start rapping?
I might.
Okay.
You are in the room where it happens, by the way. But start to think about those areas where you say, I want one solution for our common defense. And I use the word defense, not as war, but what are the things that the public sector can do for all that actually make sense? And then where is it that where the private sector has the know-how, and let's engage. And if not for the public sector, certain things in our world today would not have gotten done. The interstate highway system, right, is the classic example.
No, these are good ones. I can think of ones that didn't work out, but we won't go there. But in this age now, what are the public-private partnerships, Josh, that we need to get right?
Yeah.
Well, one example that I'm excited about, because we have this new kind of, I think, bipartisan consensus around nuclear, is the potential for the public sector to help demonstrate the safety, reliability, feasibility of nuclear in the near term. And one thing I know that the DOE is looking into is a potential to start deploying SMRs, small modular reactors, on federal land, perhaps Department of Defense, but areas where the government can be the pilot to help us demonstrate the feasibility of it, prove that it works, make sure that it's safe, make sure the public trusts it and knows that it's safe, and then the private market takes off, right? Because we've demonstrated it in a safe environment, we know that it works, and then you can scale from there.
Let me ask, I'm going to ask you another question, and then we're going to have a shift in our show here. But I want to also give some lucky person, golden ticket to ask a Josh a cool question. It might be Ann who's laughing at this moment. But let me just ask you, what do your chips do and achieve in this discussion? Tell us about the NVIDIA chip. Give us a journey, into what your company is producing, why it's so important. And do your chips hang out with other chips? As we talk about these data centers, do you mix well? Do you play well with other chips? Or, I'd like to have somebody kind of disaggregate the chip dimension as we talk about powering the future and AI for real. Where does NVIDIA's chip fit in there?
I'd say our chips are social. Yeah, they play well with others. But what NVIDIA really develops now, we don't just design chips, because if you just design the chips, you wouldn't be able to build supercomputers on the scale that we're trying to do. And to solve the really big problems, to train the really big models, and we don't need really big models for everything, but we do need them for some things. To train them, you need all of these chips and all of the systems to operate as basically a single unit. So what you see in the data centers nowadays, in these AI factories, is a bunch of varieties of chips. So networking chips, CPUs, GPUs, lots of networking components, lots of cooling components, and then of course the software that goes on top. And so what we've done to try to integrate all of that to create a single supercomputer that can solve really challenging problems is to innovate across the stack. And that's one of the reasons why the energy efficiency of AI has improved so rapidly. Just in the past one generation of our hardware, we've seen an improvement of 30 times in energy efficiency for the same software workload. So if you were running ChatGPT-4, queried it 2 years ago, it would have taken 30 times more energy than it does today. So innovating across that and making everything function as a single computer, supercomputer, is really what enables us to drive more performance and also deliver efficiency at the same time.
Well, when I was at the White House with Jensen, see how I did that?
I was with Jensen right before he went to the White House.
But with the president?
What?
But with the president?
I was not. You were there with the president, I know.
Sorry.
I was there talking to him privately
just
without
the name dropping thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, Ann has a
okay,
question.
but you were there with Jensen, right?
Well, yes, no, but actually, since I've got the mic and I'm interrupting, what I love is that you'll hear people talk about knowledge now in terms of megawatts, right? So you hear Jensen talking about the power of those chips. The tokens per megawatt is a real measure now being used to, this tells us how powerful. People used to talk about cycles on a chip. No, now we're talking about the power usage.
Let me go to Ann Clausen and get a question. And Ann is one of the smartest people I know. So Ann, I have no idea what question you might have, but go for it. And then we're going to bring up my friend Eric Holdsworth, who's going to join us.
I will see if I can find a way to name drop because I am DC-based. Thanks for the time, Ann Clausen with Cascade Advisory, and I tend to think a lot about materials. So both of your companies need a lot of inputs to make all of the tools that you're developing, whether they're chips, whether they're all of the large equipment Siemens makes. And we're at a point now where we're decoupling from China. We also know that a lot of the current critical minerals production is not always the cleanest. And so there's this opportunity between the decoupling and between knowing that there's a gap in environmental footprint for the US to take leadership in terms of how critical minerals are sourced and how they're done. But I would imagine that this also presents for you a supply challenge from both the national security perspective, what happens when we can no longer source XYZ, but also from a sustainability perspective, what happens when we can't shop for the best product, but instead we have to take what's available. So I'm really curious to hear how both of you are thinking about the sourcing you're doing.
Josh, how tight a constraint is the chokehold over critical materials, to get to Ann's point?
So the critical minerals, I think there's good public literature about how much of that comes from China. So that is absolutely something we need to be thoughtful about. We need policy solutions for. We do need ongoing access to those critical materials. On the bright side, however, what the innovation around accelerated computing has done at NVIDIA is to basically say, okay, if you need so many exaflops of compute performance to train your next model, what we're going to do is we're going to take that amount of exaflops and we're going to run it on a much, much smaller physical footprint than you could do just a couple of years ago. So it's basically creating so much compute density, driving so much computing performance out of a much smaller physical package that the amount of tantalum or gold or whatever you need for that exaflop of performance is a tiny fraction of what it was just a few years ago. So it's driving us towards better materials efficiency, including in the critical minerals.
It's a great design constraint example. And then I will just add to this, our global head of supply chain is actually in New York right now, and I'll get a chance to talk.
But not in this room.
Not in this room, but I will name drop Klaus Staubitzer. But I will share with you that what this whole situation the world is in right now has led us to be more deliberate about circularity. And so, the way we design our own products and then where we're sourcing the materials that we're going to be using. So actually, this is not one of those things where just the theory of sustainability, but the sheer economic force is causing a lot of businesses to move forward on circularity.
Well, look, we're going to move on, but this does remind me, I hang out, I'm name drop too, as you know, I'm really good at it, but I hang out with a lot of AI CEOs, not just Jensen, but others, and I ask them, I say, what's your up at night issue? And they often say copper, which just kind of, caught me by surprise. So, there are these different dimensions that move into just a very another world that, that's going to require this. Look, Josh, I love talking to you, and I always sort of feel better after I talk to you, and then
I love meeting another optimist.
Yeah, and another optimist, and I do think that we're at a time where, even though I think gravity is taking us very fast a certain direction, and it feels like it can be very empowering, there are some policy things that are needed. And because I do know your CEO well, I also know there are hard choices involved that could affect entire industries, and whether this stays a rosy and Barbara Humpton style optimistic picture, or whether or not some of the legs of the stool get knocked out. So I do want to thank you for joining us. So let's give a big, big, big round of applause to Josh Parker, Head of Sustainability at NVIDIA. Barbara, you having fun? You want to stay up here a little bit more?
If you'll have me.
Yeah, I think you'll give Barbara a round of applause. She's doing a good job.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Now, let me welcome to the stage Eric Holdsworth, who's the Managing Director of Climate Programs for the Edison Electric Institute. And he represents really all the U.S. investor-owned electric companies. Eric, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Steve, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, really
Appreciate
good. So, investor-owned electric companies. Does that mean you're the utilities guy?
I'm the utilities guy.
Okay, good.
But investor owns are one of three flavors of utilities, right? So, or as we like to call ourselves, electric companies. We also have public power, and then you've got your rural co-ops.
So which are your favorite?
Well, of course, I'm an IOU guy, so I like the investor owns. We produce about 70% of the nation's electricity.
Okay. So, we had this question when I was with Josh, and we were doing this thing about, AI and power, and I was anticipating this tomorrow. Let me just put it bluntly. We've got a lot of different corners of this. Barbara Humpton and Siemens, laying out, real AI, AI for real, I need to get the nomenclature right. I'm interested in what does your industry, what do your members need to do to plug into this future in a great way? I was going to say in a better way because that would imply that they're not always great, but I will give you, the optimistic frame.
Thank you, and I'm just glad we're not talking about chip envy. So, but no, I would. Our folks need to be integrally involved in these conversations, and that's what we've been doing already, right? As the data centers are coming online, we need to be having conversations to them to know how much power do they need, where are they going to need that, right?
They need a lot.
Yes, well, yes, we know that, right? But it's important to coordinate on all that, right? You can't just show up and say, I need 300 megawatts of power next year. It's a multi-year planning cycle. So it's important. And of course, what we're hearing a lot, and I'll just do my own name dropping. So we've had Jensen, we've had Safra Katz with Oracle, we've had others come and talk with our CEOs. And the part of the point of all of that has been really to discuss collaboration and the need for all these different parties, right? The tech developers, the data centers, the utilities. We have got to be working together to make this happen, or it's not going to happen. Because you can build a data center and not have power. I can't build power and not have a data center. That's stranded capital. So we've really got to work at this together. And I've been really encouraged to see a lot of those conversations going on as we're trying to chart this path together now.
So do you know the company Encore?
Yeah.
Are they a member?
They're not like a board level member, but they are.
But they're a member. They pay
yeah.
some form of dues to
Yeah.
you? Okay, well, I just want to make sure they were on time. But I'm interested in Encore because when I interviewed John DeBoer, remember we had Encore on there. We had the head of corporate strategy for Encore. And they basically were talking about Dallas and Texas itself being the fastest growing now place for data centers and a lot of this. And one of the parts of this story, and I said, why? He says, because it takes us 6 months to get our permits in place for building, and none of the rest of the country can keep up. How does permitting, we're going to get in this with one of our other guests, but how does permitting play in your world? Can you keep up? Can your industry keep up with the surging demand as you need to build more and more capacity? But my understanding of permitting really slows things down.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a really critical issue, I think, for everybody involved in this space. If it's going to take us 7 to 10 years to site and build a power plant or site and build transmission lines, we're not going to meet this challenge we're talking about, right? It's just not going to physically happen. So we've got to find a way to ensure the safeguards that process has, right? But it can't take that long, right? We've got to be a lot more nimble, both in that process, I think also in pipeline building, other types of infrastructure, and frankly, we've got to kind of figure out large-scale transmission as well if we're going to make this. I mean, we can build the power, right? The data centers know that they're going to need the power. We need to coordinate the timing on that, but we have got to find the infrastructure. A lot we can do with today's, right? But we're going to need more of everything, and we've got to coordinate on
Barbara?
that.
Yeah, I'm actually curious about, the great thing about an association and working together as a group is that—
Are you a member?
I would not be.
No,
I'm not an independent-owned utility.
No, I think you guys might be like in our associate member category or one of our
Because Siemens
friends
Energy
right.
and our colleagues here
Friends of the
provide
universe.
Amazing equipment into that ecosystem. But the thing about working together and speaking with one voice is that it's easier than to tackle the really tough problems. I'd be curious to know what are the top issues you're voicing right now, and I have to believe that in addition to just this massive demand for power and therefore permitting, also the effect of the tariffs and trade changes and things like that. How do we build faster in a world where things are costing more?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say probably that's certainly one of them, permitting and siting, and where is the power going to come from, right? That is what keeps us up at night a lot as well. But yeah, certainly supply chain issues. Well, you guys were just talking a little bit about critical minerals, right? The copper famine is probably something that's going to become very real in about 10 years and could have significant impacts, again, on the energy transition, on the movement to clean. Copper's one. There's many other of the critical minerals, and that's its whole own story. But no, so that's part of what we're trying to work around, right? That's impacting the cost of transformers. It impacts the cost of a lot of equipment. We're trying to work with the administration to make them aware, right, of if you're putting tariffs on, are there ways of exempting some of these critical pieces of equipment that we need to deliver we need every drop of energy we can possibly find these days to meet the growing demand from data centers. So we need to have, we need to be able to get to that equipment. We're also trying to keep it affordable, reliable. People's electric bills are going up. So anything we can do to try to cut that down. But it's a huge impact, right? I mean,
Yeah, and Steve, I don't know what you're hearing, but I get questions all the time about how do utilities make the decision about who gets the power?
Right.
right. Well, I mean, people come to us, right? I mean, we'll have, people come and bring requests, and depending on what kind of market you're in, right? If you're in MISO or PJM, one of the regional markets, that's going to go into a queue process, and there's a system for that. If you're working with a vertically integrated utility, you're bringing that, you're going to that utility and trying to bring that case to them and working with them to see if they can bring the power on. So.
Eric, what grade would you give the grid?
Well, I'll put it this way. You asked that question earlier, right? And I was thinking about this, and I'm like, on the one hand, I give the grid an A triple plus because it's the most amazingly complex thing we've built as a human species, and the fact that it can work and bring power all around is amazing. Now, we've put a lot of things on that grid in the last 20 years that have challenged that old grid, right? So we do need to bring a lot of new materials on, and enhanced conductoring. There's a lot of different types of software we can bring on to move what we have on the system more efficiently. So
I think that's a very fair answer, and I appreciate that answer very much. But I want to ask you, and I know for a lot of reasons. One, I've been friends with Barbara Humpton for a very long time, and she has shown me lots of different dimensions of Siemens, which is out there on a frontline company, innovating, et cetera. I think one of the doubts, and I want to tell you, it's perhaps an inappropriate doubt in the utility sector, is that they're not the same pressures on utilities to innovate. What do you think? I know you've talked about innovations in the utility companies, but are they keeping up from your sense with how not only demand is met, but plugging in different technology? And if my impression is wrong, could you help us correct how utilities are in fact becoming bastions of innovation?
Yeah, well, honestly, that's one of the things I'm really most proud of in working with the industry is its innovation and addressing this, right? Our industry is really the first one to full scale get on board with moving towards net zero and try to move towards cleaner forms of generation. We've led all other sectors in reducing our CO2 in building and trying to deploy next generation capital. So our members are involved in developing a lot of pilot projects on advanced nuclear, CCS, all the kind of next generation technologies. But I think what's interesting is the pressure today, right, to meet the energy demand that's out there is causing a lot of utilities to also look at these newer, more innovative solutions, virtual power plants, bringing on reconductoring, enhanced cables, dynamic line rating software. So really looking at a lot of tools that are available today to squeeze more juice out because we're being forced to. But I don't think utilities have any choice these days but to try to be at the front edge of that development paradigm, because otherwise, it's just where we have to, right? We're under a lot of pressure to reduce emissions, not from the federal government, but from investors and from consumers.
Where's my microphone, folks? Was Naraka here?
I've got one here.
Oh, here. Well, here, I'm just going to go down to David, but I want somebody out here with the team. David, I'm going to give this to you. He's with the Association of the Society for Mechanical Engineers. And so I just want to give you an opportunity to ask some of our folks a question. I like front row.
Oh, thank you. I'm wondering in terms of, Siemens is certainly a supporter of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. We've had a long history in terms of developing standards. And what do you see in terms of the future for the development of standards in the area of sustainability?
Ooh. Great, go for it. Yeah. So fascinating that I'll first say that I'm not deeply familiar with this. I wonder, Stacy, if you would have anything to add to this. You don't want to be called on?
Okay.
Please.
So from a standards perspective, we're seeing two. Remind people who you are. Sorry. So I'm head of sustainability for our smart infrastructure business in the U.S. for Siemens. So support Barbara and her team. And smart infrastructure is everything from the big gray boxes all the way through to building automation. So when we talk about ASME, we really hit a wide gamut. And the standards that we see are kind of twofold. One is continuation of safety in different operating conditions that we see coming from the different load dynamics. The other that we're starting to see from ASME and other industry type organizations is around scope 3 and materials, and making sure that not only the standards on construction and safety, but also the accounting around scope 3, which is a really interesting take for industry associations to step in on. But we see several jumping in, and so I think we're in an interesting position where we're trying to converge some of those conversations around scope 3 accounting and conversations so that we don't wind up with a bunch of different, we try to take the power of all of those conversations and aggregate them together.
But actually, this is where associations, again, have this tremendous benefit to us. It's the power of the group that
We
gets
call
these
it
things
power
done.
by association. That's one of our mottos.
So Eric, we're gonna thank you in just a moment for coming, but I want to just ask you again in this core question about AI and the opportunity that AI becomes a problem solver in energy optimization. How close is your industry to really absorbing that practice?
Well, I think, and we talked about this earlier, right? But as AI becomes more refined, I think really we see that as a tool that as it becomes more refined, it can help us run the system more efficiently. So we're doing a lot of things now with individual pieces of software. AI will be able to help us really do that a lot more efficiently going forward. So, tremendous opportunities, not to mention, of course, the whole national security piece really behind the race for AI. I did think one thing that hasn't come up that I think is important, though, right, is when we talk about data centers, right, there are different flavors of data centers, right? They don't all need to have 5 nines of reliability or 9 nines of reliability. And what's interesting is some of these, there are new data centers being developed that are kind of being built to be interruptible. And what's important about that is we have to build the grid to meet the peak power, right? Even if that's for 8 hours a year or 1 week a year. These types of things can help shave that off and allow us to not have to build to that peak, but be able to meet that peak through controlled load. So
Well,
really
thank you
interesting.
so much for joining us. Big round of applause for Eric Holdsworth, Managing Director of Climate Programs for the Edison Electric Institute. Thank you. Barbara, I know I've got you for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, right? Is that what you're going to say?
Yes.
Thank you and goodbye? No.
I was.
You're going to do thank you and, good night and good luck? Not yet.
Okay.
Because I've got to ask my next friend here, Nat. I've always called him Keohane. Is it Keohane? Keohane. Well, do welcome Nat Keohane. Nat is really one of the great movers for many, many years. He is the president of the Center for Climate, Energy, and Solutions. I met him. You were at the Environmental Defense Fund, right?
Yes, that's right.
And then I knew his parents.
Everybody says that, unfortunately.
It's just he has 2 of the most famous academic parents of all time. And they were, one of them was a mentor of mine. So I just want to say, I knew both, and I think I had a dinner at the French ambassador's. We're back to name dropping in Washington, but I had a dinner at the French ambassador's residence, and I was, had Nana, your mom, at this, and then I was like going, God, I just interviewed your son. Like it was so cool. You've gotten older.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's great.
Wait, you are a chevalier of France.
Yeah, I didn't know what the word meant when I got the award, but yeah, I'm a chevalier in the Legion of Honor in France. So thank
Yes.
you. Who was clapping? I love you guys.
So-
Okay, great. Let's talk after, okay? There's a whiskey bar over here. Anybody
He's the Frenchman.
when the French ambassador called me and said, "See, we want to decorate you as a chevalier," and I said, "You can whatever you want. I'm happy to do for you. But what do I have to wear?" But anyway, it was a kind of a nice thing. But good to see you.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know if you've heard a little bit of our discussion, but we're talking about really how, I loved how Barbara Humpton started this discussion saying, we're in the precipice of a lot of massive change. It sort of feels like you're on the edge of a new industrial revolution. And in my book, there are always hard choices. You can get things wrong, you can get things right. You've been thinking about the environmental dimensions of change for a long time. So let me just start out, in a non-optimistic way. What are you most worried about?
That's tough for me because I'm always looking for the optimistic piece. But it is. But,
Jeez,
but
you're
I'll
on the
take you up
count.
on it.
You're
But I'll-
like next to Barbara.
As long as you promise.
And
that
by the
we'll-
way, she's leaving in a few minutes, not because she dislikes you.
I won't take it personally. But as long as we get to the optimism.
Yeah.
So one thing, I'll just say one thing quickly on the change that you mentioned. So I'm on the board of the Electric Power Research Institute, which is the sort of research arm, sibling of EEI. It's not the same thing as the trade. But I joined about 2 or 3 years ago. In my first board meeting, it was all, boy, we're facing flat or declining demand. How are we managing this sort of industry where the demand is flat as far as the eye can see, and and it was kind of, nobody really knew what the vitality was going to be. And then almost
Was one of them the
overnight,
CFO at Siemens, who's no longer there?
right? No, yeah, good. But you know, almost overnight, the conversation in the electric power industry changed, as you all have been hearing today, from boy, it's flat demand or declining demand to it's just a rocket ship that's taking off. And so I think, to your point, it has totally changed the conversation in the power sector. So I will get, but if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, and maybe this will feed into, I know hopefully we'll talk about policy and so on, but if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it is that we don't get the right changes in place on policy. We don't make it easier to build the transmission we need, the interconnects we need, the permitting and siting. We can talk about what happened this summer. I'd love to talk about that, but we don't have enough support for the clean, zero carbon, carbon-free power that we need. And we end up meeting this moment by ramping up some of the fossil, in particular the coal, some of the coal plants that are still on the grid. I think that's a low probability.
Price of coal is
but it's
high.
not impossible. I know, but if we can't figure out how to really make sure we're building enough
But
clean,
the price of coal is high because of the demand.
Yes,
I mean, that's,
that's right.
and that's what's happening. Barbara, I want to give you an opportunity before we send you off with great thanks for all of this to share your thoughts on the nexus of environment and to pose a question to our friend here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually had an employee ask the question, should I be running my prompts, or do I need to be mindful about the impact that's having on the environment? What should I tell her?
I mean, I may be like the rest of you. I always use the -AI just because I want to get through that and get to my search when I'm searching on Google.
Oh,
but
no.
I don't do it. I don't do it for. I guess what I would say is, I think, look, whatever is meeting her needs, right? And I wouldn't stay up at night thinking, oh my gosh, I'm contributing to this demand. I think, there may be some small things that sort of individual action can help with, but the way we're really going to solve this problem is through changing the policy structures we have, changing the frameworks we have, investing in innovation. So I wouldn't have her, stay up at night if she's using AI and she finds it worthwhile. I'm more focused on what do we do in Washington and elsewhere to clear the way.
And like what Josh said, use it. Let's get there faster.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
So with that, let's give a big round of applause to Barbara Humpton, President and CEO of Siemens USA. I'll say that Siemens and Widehall, my company, I'm the CEO of, I'm going to have been doing this partnership around the country. Thank you. And it's just been fantastic. We've had these great conversations all over the country, dealing with this and to try to deal with in a realistic way what the hard choices are. I love that you talked about the policy framework. I live in Washington. I've seen us screw up a lot of things. We're screwing up a lot every day. And so what do we have to most get right? I mean, I'm interested in what would destroy this vision and not make it happen. I'm interested in the geostrategic race that's out there and why it's important. And I'm interested in the fact that if there were elements of this that didn't come forward, like we didn't bring on the power to have this, what are the consequences of that, Nat?
Yeah, so let me state what I think the challenge is in a nutshell, and I know you've been hearing from a lot of folks about growth and so on. It is all of that growth that I think people have been hearing about. It's all of that concentrated power demand on a grid that wasn't built for it and we haven't invested in a long time.
How would you grade the grid?
And but doing it in a way that maintains affordability and that continues to reduce carbon emissions. Because what I think about every day is the climate and how we protect the climate and get to a thriving low carbon economy. So I think there are three things. I'll preface this by saying what we got that people don't realize this last summer. So that's a policy win that people don't realize we had, and then three things we need to do. So the win we don't realize, and I don't want to sugarcoat it because we lost a lot if you were following the reconciliation law and you were thinking about it from a clean energy or climate world. We lost a lot. The wind and solar tax credits that had been in the Inflation Reduction Act got really gutted, as did EV tax credits. That was the headline, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. For the environment and for climate, that was a bad outcome. But here's the thing that nobody has, I think, focused enough on. What we preserved, and this is a Republican Congress that had 0 votes in 2022 for any of this. We came in with 0, and what we preserved in Republican Congress were a range of things, including the tax credits for all of the carbon-free electricity we're going to need to really meet the rising demand over time. Battery storage, advanced nuclear, geothermal, all the other carbon-free technology, along with advanced manufacturing. So we lost a lot, but we gained we preserved a core bit that's going to be important going forward. So now I think there are 3 things we need to do if we think about time horizons. Number one, as soon as possible, we're working on it. I run an NGO called the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, as Steve said. We work a lot with companies. We mobilize companies, and we're the climate voice and they're the economic messengers, and we mobilize them for good climate and energy policy in DC. The thing we're working on right now is permitting. And when people say permitting in Washington, they mean a whole slew of things. They mean basically making it easier to build clean energy and the clean energy infrastructure that we need to meet the moment in terms of power demand, largely. So some of that is siting and permitting, and make it easier. Don't take 10 years or 7 years to build a clean energy facility or a clean energy source. Get it done much sooner. And the other thing is building the transmission we need. I think you can do, we won't go into the details, you can do that in different ways for different regions that meets different regional needs, but you can still build much more. So that's number one, build the transmission. Number two is invest in innovation, because we're going to need new forms of carbon-free power. The good news in the short run, right now, it's often the quickest thing is to build solar plus storage. And what everyone's worried about is the price, but more than the price, they're worried about quick to connect. How quickly can I build the electrons? Over time, we're going to need new forms like small modular reactors for nuclear, like geothermal, new forms of baseload generation, always on. And
I know
that's
you,
where we
I know
need
you have a
innovation.
third, but how is our science and research ecosystem in this space? Is it weathering the moment?
Well, so that's where so there's going to be an opportunity. That's the flip side of the challenge, right? Right now, we know that I think the administration has really withdrawn a lot of the investments and funding in basic research, the things that make the Department of Energy work, not just the grant programs and so on. But that means there's going to be an opportunity in 3 years or 7 years, but I think in 3 years, actually, regardless, there's going to be an opportunity to rebuild that and to do that in a way that doesn't just go back to what it looked like a year ago, but is really build a DOE and a whole infrastructure for science and research that is fit for purpose.
So I interrupted you before you got to your third point.
Yeah, the third one just really quickly, and this is looking further ahead, but you know,
Aren't you happy I remembered you had a third point?
I appreciated that. So, you know, I'm an economist. I think a lot about how do we use markets to create incentives that drive decarbonization and let the market and private actors do what they do best, which is make decisions.
Right.
So we haven't talked about market policies for a little while in Washington, but with energy demand rising, electricity growing, I think in a couple of years when we're back to talking about opportunities for bipartisan, I think a clean energy standard that's a market-based way to address emissions in the power sector could be a powerful approach. And so that's further down the line.
I want to broaden the conversation and invite, I mean, I don't know if you guys hang out together, whether you like each other, whether you're allowed to be on the same couch together, but Chris Phalen is Vice President of Domestic Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers. Chris, come join this conversation. Meet Nat Keohane. And thank you very much. Let's give Chris a round of applause for joining us here. We're going to get to the drink soon, but Chris, I love the way, the systematic way in which Nat just sort of talked about the challenges. You're at NAM. You know, we're seeing a lot of focus on the manufacturing sector and coming back. To tell you a little bit about our guest, Chris, he worked with Kristen Sinema in the Senate, and he's known as the sort of permitting czar, you know, the guy who helped do a lot of permitting reform. And permitting comes up all the time. And so I'm interested in kind of understanding, if I've got both of you, you know, your big manufacturing and your big climate energy solutions, is there a hybrid child of you that's going to live happily ever after, you know? Like, how do you bridge these things between, you know, NAM, climate, and doing these, and also looking at AI coming in as an optimizer in all of this? So your quick thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a big question for some quick thoughts, but I think that there is definitely a hybrid. Our companies are the companies that are driving this innovation, that are creating everything that we're talking about. I think it's really important to note and remember that manufacturing kind of drives everything that we're talking about here, from efficient water coolers to the servers and the semiconductors to the copper, the steel, the aluminum, the cement, the digital twins. Everything that goes into what we're talking about here has its genesis in manufacturing ultimately.
So, answer Barbara's questions. How constrained are you by tariffs, by inputs, by what Ann Clausen was talking about, you know, critical material supply? How many of these are choke points we should be really worried about?
Yeah, I think it depends on which one you're talking about. You know, I'll frankly steer clear from tariffs right now. We support common sense trade policy, and I don't want to get too far afield of my colleagues on tariffs and trade policy. But I think, to get back to permitting reform and what we're talking about here, there is a really good and clear sustainability story that I think has been missed around permitting reform. You know, there are transmission lines like we're talking about that are going to be subject to the same exact statutes that have been used to hold up oil and gas infrastructure in the past. Now, we support all of those. Like we've said before, we need everything online to get AI to where we think it can go to outcompete China. And also remember, manufacturers are a huge user of power on the grid as well. And it's important that we don't get into a position where there's a competition for scarcity of electricity. And then that comes down to your question of critical materials and inputs. Permitting reform is going to be absolutely essential to all of that, to bringing on new mines. But there's, not to get too in the weeds, but when you're talking about critical minerals, everyone thinks about, oh, we're just going to go, build a copper smelter and get all of these EMs out of it. No, each one has its own specific way of being smelted, of being refined, of being sold into the market, and China has a total, complete stranglehold on that, and that's something where permitting reform, I think, driving not just the mines, but that middle mile of the critical materials is going to be really important, and it will extend out to the electricity infrastructure and the energy infrastructure that we need as well.
Nat?
Yeah, I'll give you a concrete example of maybe the hybrid, which is something actually I think we're very aligned on right today, and this is in the permitting space. It's just a toehold, but it's actually more important than it sounds. I'll describe it. It's something called the E-Permit Act that was introduced by Representative Dusty Johnson on the Republican side and by Representative Scott Peters. Yep, Representative Dusty Johnson out of South Dakota and Representative Scott Peters from California. We actually did some of the kind of behind-the-scenes work to encourage them to work together. It builds on things that Representative Johnson and others had done before. What it does is basically it says you got to put all the federal permitting processes online. Make them all digital. It sounds like a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer. A very simple step. It's only the first step to solving things. The reason I mention it is because we went around, got a lot of folks to sign on a letter, everybody from American Rivers and the Nature Conservancy to National Association of Manufacturers and API, because there's a wide range of folks that say we've got to make it easier to build and to build energy infrastructure. And one way that starts is with transparency. The last thing I'll say just on this, it sounds like a simple thing and it sounds like a no-brainer, and it is, to put everything online. But it's also a potential unlock when you start to think about things like community engagement, stakeholder engagement, which is something we care a lot about and a lot of our colleagues on the left care about. If you make everything online, right away you provide a platform and an opportunity to do that. That resolves a lot of the problems that concerns people have. And I think it'll open up the pathway for more comprehensive permitting.
Thank you. And let me ask you, Chris, and both of you, in the minutes we have before we break into a fantastic reception, I am really interested in your reactions. And I've known your work for a very long period of time, and you've been a real hero, I think, in the environmental side. But how do you feel? I mean, does the president's AI action plan seem compelling? Does it have all the right pieces in it? What is it missing? How does it deal with some of the science ecosystem, but how does it hit the environment? Chris?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. I think we at the NAM think it's very compelling. There's obviously a lot of other AI action plans that are out there. Senator Kelly just put one out.
It's very holistic. It has
it's very holistic. I
I've
think
read it. Yeah.
It incorporates actually a lot of what we have been talking about for the last 2 years, from workforce development, which we're not going to have enough time to talk about, making sure that small and medium manufacturers have the ability to access and the know-how to use AI in their own facilities, because obviously we're all kind of thinking on the big scale here, but frankly the vast majority of our membership is small and medium manufacturers who could really benefit from the quality control, the cost savings, the innovation that comes with AI. But I do think also the permitting reform pieces of the president's action plan were quite compelling, and we're actually going to be coming out with kind of our own 4-pager that goes even deeper into what we've been talking about. When we say permitting reform, again, it could mean any of 10 or 20 statutes, and so we're actually going to talk about that.
Do you dream about permitting reform?
Yes, actually.
I thought you might. Nat, what are your thoughts on the AI action plan?
Maybe I'll take a slightly different tack, which is to come back to an earlier theme that you raised about we've got all this AI. What does AI help out with on the optimization side?
Right.
I was thinking when I was thinking about that when you asked that earlier. I was thinking about that great quote from Homer Simpson. So to paraphrase Homer Simpson, I decided I think artificial intelligence is the cause of and solution to all of the electric power sector's problems. At least I think at least we have one Simpsons fan in the audience. But the point is that I think it's creating all this demand for power. It's creating this huge energy demand. But it also is creating these opportunities, including on things like permitting reform, to radically simplify that. You can take something that used to take 9 months or a couple of years in terms of doing a study for interconnection, run it through AI and do it in 45 minutes. Varun Sivaram, who is in the Biden administration, really brilliant guy, runs something called Emerald AI that's figuring out.
We had him here
You
in
had
town.
him here, yeah. So there are great ways to be using the technology to also figure out how you moderate the power demand. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity not only to think about, well, how do we manage this demand growth, but how do we use this technology to optimize it and make better use of the system we have.
But I'm going to ask one last. Who has a burning question before we open the whiskey bar? Do you have a burning question? Bring this man the mic, because I don't even know him, but he's front row guy. But we're going to get to it in just a second. I want to ask you about something else we've been sort of flirting with, but I'm not sure we've gotten as deep a dive as we should. And that is, what does industrial AI look like, feel like? Can you help our audience understand what industrial AI is going to bring and what it's going to feel like? What are we going to achieve in that? And why is it important? Chris?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think Barbara touched on a lot of it, kind of what's happening right now around digital twins, and automation goes back all the way to the 80s. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on right now, taking kind of digital twins to its next step. So digitalization of the entire shop floor, putting sensors in kind of everything. I think they used to call it the economy of things or something like that. And that a vast amount of data can actually help optimize production processes, alert you when you need to fix something before you would otherwise know. There's something called machine vision, which one of our members is using that to sort packages, but also it can be a really compelling use case for kind of quality control that humans just physically can't see or do. Right. So as you're turning out a ton of product, and AI can scan and make sure you're getting the right thing or incoming the right thing. There's a ton of other examples out there. We have a great white paper that runs through all of these, what it means for the workforce, what it means for the shop floor, what it means for the consumer. I would point everyone there, because I know I don't have enough time.
Are people still in the picture?
People are definitely still in the picture. It's not like a wholesale replacement of everyone.
So the future still needs us?
Yeah, the future still needs us. Manufacturers are committed to having a people-centric business model going forward, but these are things that, as everyone has said, are going to be able to augment what humans are able to do and innovate already. I think about it in material sciences. I think about it in clearing the interconnection queue.
Right.
There's just a ton of different ways where, if it can save you,
Right.
a couple minutes or hours, that adds up.
I want to go to James, because I've been watching him the whole time, and you've been very engaged. You've been an active listener, and so I don't even know why you're here or who you are, but I'm going to give you a chance to make a comment. But James?
Hi, I'm James. I was interested in the concept of, if you look at Texas, for example, having its own power system separate to the country, how does AI come into that? And do you think that could be something to accelerate learning from, or does it keep separated, for example, or does it have to integrate with the bigger system? That's one of the questions.
Great. So AI and what we've seen in Texas and the power system. So Nat.
I mean, it's a great question. I wish I knew more about how AI has been used in Texas. I think what I would take from the Texas experience, if you look at where it's been successful, one thing that it's been very successful at in Texas is building lots of new clean energy and lots of energy generally, and putting it onto the grid. Now, I think it probably would be better off if they connected to some of the rest. We saw that with Storm Uri a while ago. But I think learning from that speed, and I don't think they've been doing that yet with AI, but that's the kind of thing when we talk about shortening the interconnection permitting, we're talking about really dramatically shortening the time in other parts of the country that it takes to get clean energy on, or energy infrastructure on, and that would be the lesson I would take.
My team, whoever has the mic, give John DeBoer the mic here for a minute. I'm going to go back to him for a second, but I would love to get your thoughts on that.
I think Texas, it surprised a lot of people how great they have done this summer in particular, and how much they have learned. I think coming from the Hill very recently,
one summer is one summer, right?
One summer is one summer, but I could say connecting ERCOT into the rest of the country, you can kind of probably put that aside for the time being. That's just not a political reality. Right. But I think that they've done a great job of integrating batteries and kind of showing the way forward. Again, I'm not sure how AI has been used in that, but they have clearly been able to flatten the curve, and the cost and demand trajectories have really not gone crazy out of whack, and it's just been very impressive, honestly.
Look, I just want to ask John in his, because we were in Dallas together in Texas, and we had really an outstanding array of characters that are on every dimension of what we're talking about today, from data centers to innovators to the technology folks. We had, of course, Siemens involved, but you also had essentially a backdrop of a lot of the things that needed to be fixed. We had Encore, the head of strategy. And so I want to ask John, from our time in Dallas, my sense was there's an urgency to get this right and to use these new tools and techniques and to invest quickly and build out fast. And the thing that stuck out for me is how focused that whole system was. The Dallas meeting that we had really impacted me because you felt this muscular urgency to move. And I have to say, I'm not sure I feel the muscular urgency everywhere in the country. But John, I want to go to you to see if I got it right, and you can tell me where I'm wrong.
No, I would probably just expand on some of the points that you were making. So one of the powerful things that's happened more recently in the Texas market, and it really, I think, links several of the themes that we've talked about here today, is one, Texas, from a regulatory perspective, started to look at this power problem. And they said, well, we don't have the answer, but may the best person win. And if you want to win in the world of AI and data centers, if you find ways of bringing your own power, if you find ways of participating in the market, then we can accelerate your connection to the grid. That was a different perspective and view than certain parts of the country where it was like congested, it was throttled, and things had gotten behind. So this was one motion. I think that the other thing that happened in the Texas market was a little bit of go fast and we'll find it along the way. And so one of the things that stuck out to me from our conversation in Texas was that of the 170 gigawatts that were targeted to be added to the Texas grid, which when we say that kind of number, 1 gigawatt equals the electricity of San Jose or Munich in Germany. So
I wish people would say that more often, because I have no idea what, I was talking to these guys from TerraFlow or whatever. I don't know what a gigawatt is. So thank you. So just one of those is San Jose for like one night or a year?
No, that is the peak power, and it needs to be there like it needed to be for a city. So when you picture what's happening in the market, that's the scale of what's happening. And a part of what's unpacking in the Texas market is not all of that will connect, and so it might ultimately be 5 to 10% of that will survive the grid and the interconnect process.
Right.
But when that happens, it will still add 20 San Jose's to the grid for data centers in the next 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
So that's kind of the scale of change that's happening right now.
So thank you so much for answering James's question as well. So Chris, as we finish up here and we get to drinks and reception, which I want to get into, I'd like to, I know this sounds trite, but what do you think we have to get most right to deliver on the vision that, Barbara Humpton of Siemens sort of helped paint the picture of? What do you, from your perspective, your slice of light, what is your highest priority getting right?
Again, not to be trite, it's permitting reform. It has to be
Permitting reform. I had no idea you were going to say that.
Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? But from everything that we've talked about here, but also to the large buildings themselves and getting access to water, like all of these things that are going to make AI for real are going to require permitting, and that, as it stands right now, there are myriad ways it can go wrong in just the kind of documentation phase, but also then you have a very, very long statute of limitations that allows pretty much anyone to challenge any project. And so to take it back to sustainability, if people think that just because a project is clean or renewable or a transmission line connecting it, I can tell you I have dealt with scenarios where that is not correct. And so everybody needs permitting reform. China is building, again, gigawatts, terawatts almost of generation of all kinds, and we can't be on the back foot. We can't tie one hand behind our back and expect to compete with that kind of generation and innovation, frankly. So it's permitting reform, 1, 2, 3.
Nat, what do you think we need to get most right?
I mean, well, look, I think in the near term it is permitting reform. I know that's going to. I mentioned the other things. We need to be really invested in innovation and really drive that science and research to make sure we're commercializing as soon as possible the other forms of energy that we're going to need. But that, you know, that innovation R&D that pays off in 2030, 2031, whatever, where we're going to need it. We're going to need that power. But I agree. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it is true. This is what we need. We just need to be building more. And I guess the only thing I would say for folks on, you know, in a sense, on sort of the folks in my community, the NGO community, I guess when I look at it, people worry a lot. Well, if we make it easier to build infrastructure, we're going to build a lot of, you know, fossil infrastructure and oil and gas. And I understand that concern. But right now, what I say is the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure we have today is a 20th century fossil energy infrastructure. And so that powered the country. But if you're worried about sort of a fossil fuel infrastructure, that's what we have today. And I think the economics will favor clean if we just make it easier to build. And so I think the view from the kind of climate hawk perspective is we just need to make it easier to build clean energy infrastructure, easier to build transmission and site things. And the economics of clean are going to win out. And if we're going to build a 21st century infrastructure, we gotta clear the way.
Well, look, I just want to, first of all, thank you both. I want to thank all of our speakers and thank our audience. And I'm just going to put my own editorial here. I don't think that we do enough, either on our journalism or our commentary as we're thinking and painting a picture of the future, looking at what AI can do and solve, is to kind of connect it more solidly to sustainability, addressing the climate, addressing these issues. You know, it's sort of like, it sometimes feels like we're taking the AI world, the AI wonk world, the AI silo, and okay, now we're adding this. But there are these natural connections, you know, in terms of looking at optimization. But it's why I love this program. I love this program that Widehall has had the privilege of doing with Siemens, because I think that there is a very, very powerful dimension of this. But when you sit around with AI wonks in Davos, it almost never comes up, so shame on them. So I do want to say thank you very, very much, Nat Keohane. Nat, of course, is president for the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. Chris Phalen, vice president of domestic policy for National Association of Manufacturers. I want to thank Siemens very much for this partnership. And we're going to keep doing these things and doing these programs. You're now an alumni of our group, and apparently we have a whiskey bar over here that can take us to the next level, or other beverages of your choice. So thank you all very much for joining us. Let's give a big round of applause to our guests. And thank you all very much for joining us.